Welcome back. We're heading to our correspondent, Olu Phillips, who has been keeping tabs on the developments in Lekki. Well, yes, indeed, some governors did visit there recently, but Olu brings us up to speed on what is the mood at this moment. Hello, Olu.
Chamberlain, good morning. It's the first work day of the week, and it's a bit nostalgia standing right here at what you can describe as Nigeria's version of the Azusa Street. A bit to my left, you can see vehicles, first set of vehicles approaching, and with some kind of skepticism we can see on their faces. Earlier, I spoke to some of them, and they were like, they're not sure. There's still this palpable fear or palpable thinking around or caution around driving around this area. Somewhere to my right, we still have security officers keeping vigil and keeping watch of this environment. Remember, this was the grounds where all of those proclamations were made, all of those demands were made. And it will go down in history also, Chamberlain, whether we like it or not, that on this ground, a demand was made 5 for 5, calling for the end and scrapping of SARS. The federal government listened, and that unit of the police department was scrapped and replaced, and all of the things that the federal government has tried to put in place as a result of that campaign here. Lagos state government also, like every other, and some other state government, have also set up judicial panel of inquiry. All of that is derived from the activity that happened here. While there must still be controversies as regards the outcome of the shootings and all of that, was there a shooting? Were there army soldiers here who shot and all of that? The truth again is that the Lekki Toll Plaza will go down in history as a place where young people sat out day in, day out for more than 10, 12 days, chanting, singing the national anthem and singing solidarity songs, from which the whole world heard them, and all of that now is history.
All right, then, Olu Phillips, we thank you for your reporting, but we'll also keep tabs and get more updates as we progress. But we did talk about some governors visiting, having a tour about what went down in that area and other parts of the area. Let's take a look at some of what transpired while they visited.
One after the other, governors of the southwest states arrive at the Lagos House Marina to commiserate with their colleague, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who is most troubled about the level of destruction in the state by rampaging youth who took advantage of the EndSARS protests. The governors were not alone, as some ministers from the southwest region are also here for the same reason. After a brief discussion and a glimpse of some damaged property, they proceed to the street to see things for themselves. The first port of call is the Igboshere High Court.
Okay, I didn't even know that Olumide is here with us. I thought you were also a prophet. I saw you a week ago in Abuja. Why didn't you foretell this to me?
Then the Nigerian Port Authority building, as well as the State DNA and Forensic Center. And finally, at the Lekki Toll Plaza, where Mr. Babatunde Fashola believes he has found evidence that will be useful in investigating the Lekki shooting. Afterwards, they head back to Marina, appealing for peace and assuring the public of bringing the perpetrators to book.
We will be right to say Lagos was turned to a war zone, because the damage could not be worse than this if we were at war. The vile manipulation by elements keenly anxious to annihilate Southwest and destroy our common heritage must be condemned, and we condemn it. We charge the relevant security agencies to investigate all cases of violence with a view of identifying the culprits and bringing them to book.
We are sure that all will be well. For all to be well, we appeal that we should refrain from volatile, provocative, inciting messages and language, so that we can then stand away and begin what I believe will be an investigation which the federal government is also supporting and which the state has started, that would really help us unravel how we got here.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives also came calling, and he describes the destructions as a setback for the country's commercial capital.
And look at the devastation and say we're now at the stage of reconstruction. Reconstruction was a language that was used during the Second World War in Germany. It was a language that was used during the Civil War in Nigeria. I never thought, where we are today, having come this far, that we'll be talking reconstruction again. The governor was telling me just now that it was going to cost about ₦1 trillion to rebuild Lagos. That makes my heart heavy.
With assurances from authorities, Nigerians will be waiting to see how things unfold in the next few weeks, with hope that justice is served.
Well, with those things that you have seen, you definitely are wondering what is there to talk about that hasn't been said already. But then Dr. Tunde Bakare, as you have seen that opening slide, joins us now to share some of his perspectives on this and a number of other issues. He's a serving overseer, Citadel Global Community Church. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know you've been speaking on a variety of issues, but a quick take on what you think has gone wrong, especially with the visit of the governors from the southwestern states and some ministers, especially concerning all the mayhem that was unleashed on Lagos and a number of other parts of Nigeria. What's your take?
Well, we can only thank God Almighty for the quick visit of the governors from the southwest and ministers from the federal capital. The tour they're taking will let government know exactly, especially at the federal level, the damage that had happened and that had occurred in Lagos State, and that is occurring in other parts of the country. It's a welcome idea that they visited to encourage the governor here, who had been laboring day and night, and it will give a sense of direction also to the government at the federal level. It's a welcome idea, and more of that should happen in the days to come, especially engaging the key players in the civil protests that went down south.
But, Dr. Bakare, let me just jump straight into it. Let me start you off on this metaphor that came to my mind. You have been speaking to leadership about leadership of Nigeria. So the metaphor here is, let's take the nation as a car, as a vehicle. Most of the time, people see the headlamps, they see the body of the car, they see the driver, they see so many other things. But there are hidden parts of that vehicle that people don't see. People don't see the engine, they don't see the wiring and all of that. If you are to situate that with Nigeria, where do we need to begin to deal with the issues from?
It's often said that the fish stinks from the head. I think with what had happened in the past few days that led to the carnage that took place on the 20th of October and thereafter, government should sit back and see what kind of services they're delivering to the nation. The engine room that you mentioned is very critical. Nobody knows what goes on in the corridor of power, in the bedroom of power, or say, for example, at FEC level, the whole nation will not see from time to time the decisions that have been made and how it affects citizens uh, from time to time. So, time had come for an introspection, for the government to sit back, those people in leadership, and say, how have we served our people? Where are the dividends of democracy for them? Because what you saw in the mayhem that just took place is the rage of the poor, essentially. Very condemnable, but if they are pushed to the wall, that's what you get, the rage of the poor. And the devastation that occurred, the buildings that were burnt, the palaces, the private investments of other people should give is like a wake-up call for us all that we are not, after all, saved. And no matter the size of our walls, the fences that we think will protect us, or the armed men that could ward away these people, there are just too many, and many of them are desperate enough, ready to die, and ready to kill. So the government should sit back and say, hey, there must be a new way of handling situations like this and of ensuring that the citizens get what they deserve. If we do that, and we come clean and come to the public and tell them where we were wrong and what we think we will do better, it will assuage the tension that we're experiencing now.
Well,
It begins with the end.
You've have been a part of such movements over time. You've talked about the June 12, the fallout of the June 12 saga so many times, that of 2012 and all of that. Are there comparisons from the past, lessons from those experiences that we had? You, of course, are aware that the one of June 12 lasted for some 5 years or thereabout until the head of state at the time, passed. So what are those lessons that we must learn now in order to reap the benefits that the protest that you said was largely successful, in order to reap those benefits? What are the things that need to be done now so that in another 20 years, we're not looking back and having regrets?
Unfortunately, there seems to be a disconnect, a total disconnect, generationally and regionally. Let me explain that. When this protest began, I was happy to start with that the young men and young women in this nation have woken up. Because when we were protesting and others before us, it was like they were in a sleep mode. But suddenly they rose up to accept responsibility to bring change to our polity and to our society. But when it was getting to the fifth day, in fact, before the fifth day, by the third day, I started engaging both sides, those in government and key leaders of the movement. And look, the moment the government had accepted your demands, it's time to change from street protests to engaging the government. Now, June 12 was slightly different because that was a rape of democracy. And people were enraged because the entire nation voted for a man and the election was annulled. It was bad, but thank God, and President Buhari seemed to have brought a closure to that by honoring NQ Abiola, Chief NQ Abiola, by declaring that the election it was wrong to have annulled that election and by conferring on him the highest honor, GCFR. And alongside, the likes of Gani Fahmy was also honored for their active engagement of government all through their lives. But you see, the other protests that came, the ones I took part in, by the grace of God, I led civil protests 4 times in this nation, twice in Abuja and twice in Lagos. The last one in Lagos was your Jota, where Nigerians gathered to protest against the corruption in some regime. Now, if you watch what we did, there was a starting point of that protest. We marched to another point, either in Abuja or here in Lagos. The first time in Abuja, the secretary to the government, to the Federation Metros, and we placed our demands on his hand. The second one in Lagos, we marched from Oba Akinjobi around Bishop Vining Church to Alausa. We presented our demands to the governor. And then the last one was the march from Fountain to the National Assembly. It eventually, alongside with so many other people joining all over the world, young people also, the Novice Enough group, who were able to secure what the Senate eventually called doctrine of necessity that enabled the then vice president to become acting president and ultimately president on the 5th of May that year when President Yaradua died. Every time we changed strategy. Now, the young men were protesting, it was their civil rights, but the moment they located themselves in a major road artery, we knew that there was going to be trouble and our government would not fold its hands. So we began to call on both sides to find a way of relocating themselves before trouble will hit. But, well, I do not want to apportion blames. They stayed longer, and by so doing, they were infringing on the rights and fundamental rights of other citizens, and government had to do something. It is condemnable that they were shot at. Even if they just shot into the air, there will be pandemonium. We must find other ways of engaging citizens so that such Black Tuesday will never occur in our land anymore. An actor quits the stage when the ovation is loudest. And if you stay longer than necessary in the dunghill, all kinds of flies will come. Both sides will have lessons to learn. Government to exercise extreme restraint. And we had assurances from government that there will be no military intervention at all in this protest. But what went wrong, we'll leave that to Judicial Commission of Inquiry, already set up by Lagos State government and other state governments. And I'm so glad that by yesterday, the presidency had also responded. The president said he pledged justice for the dead protesters and the policemen that died in that action. Let us wait and see that. But there are ways to conduct yourself, even in a civil protest, without infringing the law. And honestly, my heart yearned and cried and wished that the moment the curfew was imposed by Lagos State government, that was the time to say, let's back off right now, we'll gather again. It's regrettable, it's condemnable what happened, but both sides had lessons to learn. Where to do these things, how to do them, and how to exercise restraint in the face of provocation.
So, given the way the authorities have responded, the action or inaction of security agencies and government, would it be a good idea for leaders amongst the protesters to come forward and then begin talking to government or engaging different groups?
You know, the first flaw that I noticed when the protest began, and we are trying to reach out to those we considered key leaders among them, the moment I began to hear we have no leaders to engage anyone. In the past, this is how they will take leaders aside aside, and before you know it, they will settle them. Therefore, we are all leaders. I knew, and I said to some of them, this is class suicide. My understanding of the Bible, from Judges chapter 19 to 21, the Bible says there was a time in Israel when there was no king in Israel, and every man did what pleased him. The end product of that was a tribe was missing at the end of the day. They lost, they were destroyed in the world, and they had to now be looking for young women, for few men that were left, so that a tribe would not be missing in Israel. I said, don't commit class suicide by saying we have no leader. You must know how to translate your protest into progress by letting your leaders engage government. We engage government at all, almost at all levels, whether at the state level in Lagos or the federal level, and we're able to push some policy change as a result of that engagement without corrupting ourselves and without touching the filthy lucre. Not once did we take money from any government, whether at the state level or federal level, but we kept on pushing and we got results. And part of that was part of my address yesterday. So now this leaderless class must know that, as they will say in Yoruba land, there must be those influencers amongst them who they can trust enough. It's lack of trust, who they can trust enough that they will not misrepresent their interest or the interest or the reason for which they were protesting to start with. If they had focus and they had goals, it's time to present it. And if the government does not yield, then more protests will come, but in a very, very, in a better way, packaged in a better way than what we saw these past few days.
There is so much to talk about, but just give us a few minutes to take some messages. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Well, Dr. Bakare, let's talk about policing for a bit. Now, the action of the police moving forward is going to be very pivotal. Now, people expect a change, but the police is peopled by the same personnel. Can people get the change they expect as quick as they want it? Yes, we know you suggested the entry qualification, OND, but how soon and how quick? Because when they hit the streets, their action or inaction could generate further response, which who knows how it will turn out.
I'm sure you know the story of Georgia, a small country that came out of the old Soviet Union. What the leader did then was to disband the entire police force, and crime rates dropped. It was a shock to the whole world. If you have ever read the story, or you can Google it, it was a shock, because as soon as they were disbanded, crime rate dropped and a new crop of people were brought in. Now, that may not fit our situation. This is not a case of one cap fits all. But there are good elements in the police force, definitely. One rotten egg or one rotten apple can destroy a whole apple cart. I think part of the way to start is the culprits, the ones that are found to have brutalized people, that have abused their power, because the first point of contact of citizen with government is a policeman. The policeman is the ambassador of the government. The citizen hardly will have access to the president or to the governor of the state or to his commissioners or ministers or even to local government chairmen. But they will meet police constantly on the road. And if anyone had been found to abuse his power, misuse the gun that was put in his hand by the state due to the taxes of citizens or whatever, those ones should be brought to book first. When judgment is not speedily executed, the hearts of men are set in them to do evil. When those ones are dealt with and they see that law, there's enforcement of law, even within the police force, other policemen will learn their lessons and they will know how to behave gently with citizens. And that's number one. Entry point of the new intakes and training will be very pivotal to the future of police reform in our country. But those who are in can be retrained, and as it was suggested, they should be examined, whether psychologically, mentally, to know that they are fit, because they also have been harassed. I was told a story by one of the key leaders of the NSAS protest that there was a gentle man within the force, part of the SARS, that was gentle, that was always there to help them when they were engaging the police in the past. He had led this for some 3 years now, the gentleman who spoke with me, and he said one day they were shocked that the same man who had been gentle and easily disposed to their demands and everything, one day just got out of his own vehicle and shot a last man. They were wondering what happened, but he had been building up tension that eventually manifested on the road that day. Road rage, it is called. We need to combine so many things together to reform the police. One, quickly, and not in an extrajudicial manner that they have done, with the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. Let it be open, let it be transparent, bring the culprits who had abused their power or power given to them by the state, bring them to book, let them pay for it. And not only that, we still are waiting patiently to know who ordered the military to go into Lekki, and then to find out who are the officers responsible for shooting. If we don't look into that, I don't think you can bring a closure to this matter. Police reform is critical, and I'm not saying the government does not have a right to quell riot, but the way and manner it happened, it needs to be visited so that where apologies are needed to be tendered by the government or by the military or by the police force, that should be done speedily in order to assuage the tension we have in our land.
Well, Dr. Bakare, perhaps that we have a long way to go there, and I'll tell you why. The perception of people on the streets in different parts of Nigeria about security agencies altogether, I think there is a lot of work to do there. For instance, back in time when the Civil War ended, people ascribed some regard, some respect, some privileges to security operatives, the police, the soldiers. They allowed them right of way. They gave them some privileges. And it would seem that over the years, especially in recent times, those privileges that people gave to them, they have begun to see as their rights. Consequently, they get on queues, they don't queue, they just want to rummage through and all of that. And that, in a way, has also affected the image of Nigerians towards security operatives, irrespective of whatever major challenges they themselves may be having. How do we begin to readdress that? Because, as you know, the trust deficit is greatly depleted. How do we begin to rewind?
You have hit the nail on the head. You touched it straight away, trust deficit. What we need, I remember a song, I can't recall now who by, whether it's fella, the Kakino Bileda. Look, these policemen and military officers are also human beings. They should remember that. The weapon of violence in their hand is what gives them the entitlement mentality that they have. But they can be overwhelmed by the citizen and they can be overpowered. And in the face of rage of the poor, they will run. Many of them were advised not to wear their uniform in the past few days. They've been going to places, even security men coming out in mufti. If we remember that we are rendering service to the people and that we are there to protect the welfare and the security of the people, if that is inculcated into them right now on, and in leadership within the force, the whole of armed forces, when they begin to inculcate that into them, hey, guys, we are servants of the people. We are here to maintain security. We are here for their welfare, that the purpose of government is the welfare and security of the people. If we begin to ram that into their mind, I don't want to say their brain so that it doesn't sound offensive, then they will change. And honestly, I believe a lot has to do with leadership within the armed forces. The model is what their subordinates or those who are under them do. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 says, when you see oppression and injustice in a city, high officials are set over high officials, and higher officials are set over them. If those who are brutalizing people are now taking results of their crime, of their wickedness to their superiors, if those on the road are always harassing citizens, taking money from them, and then delivering deposit, bringing back returns to those who send them, then we are not out of the woods yet. That ought to stop, which means we have to pay our policemen well. I understand that some of them buy their uniforms, some of them buy their boots. Where is that done? It's both sides that we have to look into. The harassment that this natural, who could be natural fathers at home, natural husbands at home, once they wear the uniform and everything changes, we need to look into what is producing that psychologically and otherwise. We need to take both sides, check both sides very well, because they are human beings. The gun in their hands is what gives them that little superiority or entitlement mentality. But in a state of chaos, like we witnessed, even they too, we wrong.
Well, Dr. Bakare, there's a school of thought that believes that the system is built on a flawed foundation, which is injustice. In fact, some think that all of this that we see playing out, they're just symptoms, not even hitting the nail on the head. In fact, some of them subscribe to this, which we would like you to listen to and give us your impression.
I dare to tell this nation today that this is the problem. This constitution can never give us progress. This constitution can never give us peace.
What do you think?
Well, what the distinguished senator said is spot on. Unfortunately, in a polity or political climb here, governance has not been a continuum. That's why Miriam Babangida can start Better Life for Rural Women, and Miriam Abacha will come and turn it to Better Women for Rural Life. And everything is upside down. We want to discredit the government before us instead of making it a continuum. One of the best things that would have happened to this nation was the constitutional review or reform that took place under Chief Obasanjo, Olusegun Obasanjo. But the third-term agenda killed it, and we threw water and the baby out. And then President Jonathan called one of perhaps the best conference I'd witnessed and participated in this centenary conference, the 2014 National Conference. And many of the things that were agreed upon unanimously without a vote should have laid the foundation for our future. But rather than utilizing it, we threw it aside. And then this government mandated the Aerofile Committee to look into these issues of injustice, of over-concentration of power at the center, that when that happens, a government cannot be sensitive or responsive to citizens because you have locked everything, and one day a constitution that does not bend, we have to break. Because law is meant for people and not the other way around. We know that the law is good if a man uses it lawfully. That's what the Bible says. When God took Israel out of Egypt for 40 years, he kept them in the wilderness, giving them law. Law is the foundation of any progressive society. If there's no rule of law and there's rule of man, we can never have peace. I agree totally with what he said. A constitution that will say we the people. At what stage did the people gather to do that? That was an imposed constitution written by one man, imposed by the influence of one military man over the entire nation. We need to re-examine these things, because where right is might, society will have peace. But wherever might is right, there will be continuous chaos in such society. I agree with the senator completely, and I've not changed my mind. Until rule of law is a foundation for what we do, until we have respect for judicial pronouncement, until there's no more judicial hierarchy, we cannot have peace. When justice can be bought by by those who have the means to do it, there cannot be peace in our society. And that's why leadership, those in government should look in the mirror. Even with this Judicial Commission of Inquiry that they're setting up, they should look in the mirror and see what they are contributing to the mess in our nation at all levels of government, be it the executive, the legislative, or the judicial arm of our government.
Dr. Tunde Bakare, I'm sure this is a conversation that's just starting, which will continue, but we definitely thank you for this time, hoping that we'll be able to reach you again for further conversation on Nigeria. Serving Overseer, Citadel Global Community Church. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Dr. Tunde Bakare.
Thank you for having me. God bless you and God bless Channels TV.